Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, this is my follow-up to Preston Nichols. So you could call this part 2. I found a very interesting article on him and reporters that went to his house, met one of his associates, Stuart Swerdlow. Who is a popular New Ager now. I think he has some books and websites and other things. Also, this was a segment that was produced by a woman, Chica Bruce, who has her own TV channel now, I believe, and has been involved in lots of research and conspiracies for a long time. And I believe she's still active. I haven't had a chance to look through all of that, but has her own little TV network or has lots of activity on the net. And it's very interesting what goes through here. And I think it's important to know some of this. I'm not sure how important it is. As Preston Nichol went on later in life, he did lose a huge amount of weight. And of course, he died fairly young in his 60s, and not surprisingly, considering he wasn't all that well. And of course, he was very overweight for most of his life. Now, it's very interesting when you figure out where he lives and everything else. Now, I don't know how much this means or what they do, but the little video here, as he says, are 8 or 9 minutes, is something that everybody should check out. So make sure you go down to that link and go over there and look at that, as I am just kind of a reporter. I do this all the time. I don't make up stories. I find stuff. I use my analytical thinking, my 50 years in this particular area of research and study, my massive background of training to decipher what this is all about and who these people are. Now, I knew a guy named James who was a good friend of Preston Nichols, so he claimed. And they spent a lot of time together. He built things for him. They knew each other. They did certain psychic readings. Now, we have all the problems here to understand what's going on. So, Preston Nichols may have been quite a nice guy. Of course, they didn't talk too much. People don't come out and tell you about people's private lives and what's going on. He claims to me that at that time, and I always wonder why he told me that, well, my problems happen with women. That's what messes me up. I kind of thought, well, that's kind of strange. Why did you tell me that? Well, it comes to the fact that Preston Nichols has been linked to and most likely is gay, whatever that means. So, and this is part of his actual deprogramming, which, of course, this is how people are programmed. We know this from all the MK Ultra stuff that's talked about, that people are programmed through different aspects of sexual practices. This is quite common, particularly going against your normal sexuality, meaning a gay sexuality when you're not gay, because this kind of breaks that wall of society. And once you start breaking that wall, anything is okay. And that's how life works in general. So, people usually do things at a small time. I remember one person who did a research on corruption. He says, corruption starts with a couple of free donuts and a coffee and goes from there. So, yeah, and I think that's true. That's why I have to be very careful of the slide down, whatever. But it's interesting when we get an actual viewpoint of what Preston is from this reporter. Now, it says here, Preston Nichols' home was a tiny old house that looked extremely incongruous among the multi-million-dollar McMansions that surround it. So, wherever that is in actual New York there, apparently he got a little piece of property that his father bought many years ago. So the reporter says, as he drove in the weed-covered yard and modified school bus in the driveway, it became obvious to us that we were indeed in the right place. Nichols lived there with his father, a morbidly obese old fellow who watched football perched on a lazy boy recliner. So, and of course, his mother had passed away. So apparently his father probably owned that house and he was living there. So it states here. So when they went in there, of course, he reacted to the crew and myself like Gollum, who would, after being exposed to light for the first time in years. He was so fat that it was hard for me to tell if he had any bones. He didn't even bother moving as we tried to set up around him, and he passed gas frequently in front of us without shame. The house was one of the filthiest places I've ever seen, and a huge stack that I do mean huge. There must have been at least 500 cans of Spam. Yes, the processed luncheon meat product. This was piled in one corner, stacked neatly on a wooden place it. Semi-eaten cans with spoons stuck in them were seen all over the place, as if it was all they ate, directly from the can as well. There was junk everywhere. The bathroom was rusty, piss covered. The toilet seat had been cracked completely in half and then put back together again with several rolls of thick cellophane tape. Preston wore a t-shirt that had dried food and Spam gravy, is there such a thing, spilled all over it. It was not a pretty, and he smelled really bad as well. Obviously, he was quite suspicious of me, and not without reason. Of course, I get exactly what I needed from the interview. Except for one thing, Preston's dead mother had constructed a memorial shrine to the actor Yul Brynner. An entire wall of framed photographs, newspaper clippings, magazine articles next to the massive pile of Spam. Afterwards, in the van, I asked the cameraman if he'd gotten some good shots of it, but alas, he had not. I think it had nothing to do with the story. No Spam pile either. Which is really unfortunate because, a lot of this stuff, generally, cameramen like to film everything. On the other hand, they're lazy as well. They don't want to shoot extra stuff they have to actually look at to edit later. Next up was Stuart Swerdlow, a curious fellow who told me in great detail not only of his involvement in the project, but his time spent in federal prison for a crime he told me he had been brainwashed to commit. So again, people that don't have much credibility, and of course everybody can potentially run afoul of things. So more kind of crazy stories here, and these are the kind of people I think Swerdlow is mentioned in some of the books on Montauk as well. I also met Swerdlow, he also met his wife, who explained that she had been introduced to him while he was in prison by a psychic who told her that Stuart was her soulmate, and soon afterwards, she divorced her husband for him. Okay, what a group. So she left him. Maybe she had a terrible marriage, but apparently whatever's going. So, you've got the people who are pretty unstable meeting other people, they're pretty unstable. He also stated that he was one of Preston's manually deprogrammed by Preston himself. And, of course, this is where we get into some controversies. And this is talked about there, and you'll have one of the producers, Chica Bruce, talks about what she found there and what this manual process. So it was, lastly, there was Chica Bruce herself, trying to convince me that I had not seen what I had just seen with my own two eyes. That Preston was a fat, blibbery, closeted case using conspiracy theories for ulterior motives, and that Stuart being a blatant New Ager con man. He was, at that time, into color therapy, and at the time offered to do my colors for a discount. I did an interview with Chia, and then she told me on a tour of the decommissioned Air Force Base, now a state park, which is in the Montauk area. So he met her there as well, and of course she was doing her own stuff, and this is a reporter that comes in and does it. So, and then, of course, she is a well-known conspiracy person who's involved in all this stuff and lots of money. She has a lot of different videos on Montauk, and I haven't looked at all these yet, and I think I will to find out what's going on there. In her opinion, so it's good to get outsiders, just like this guy showed up, found this giant mess, doesn't know what Preston's all about, and judged him because of his outward appearance, his filth, etc., which is obviously something that impacts you. And Preston states he can read people's auras, look into them, know what you're all about. I don't know if any of this is true or not. I wasn't told that by this friend who I spoke with mostly on the phone. I had and met him a few times. I wasn't told anything about this in general. People don't talk too much, and we didn't have that much time to go through all this stuff with him when I did meet him a few times. But we can just see the type of person here. So we've got this very strange situation. This guy lives on Spam. He's 150 pounds, 200 pounds overweight. He did lose that in his later life, and you can see pictures of him where he is now back to a normal weight. Of course, this didn't help him too much. He still died in his early to mid 60s, which is pretty, if you don't make it to 78, you're not doing what the average person does. And if you're a fairly healthy person or with a little bit of money, you should be living to about 85 without a problem whatsoever. Most people are living into their middle to late 80s now that have any kind of decent health, diets, and medical care. He died of a heart attack. When was that? 215 or something? I'm not sure, but it's been a little while now, and that's Preston. So this is Preston, and the interview in this gives you a good idea of who this guy is and the character. Now, his deprogramming involved him, which apparently seems to be only, there was the Montauk Boys, and that's what they were. They were conditioned to be a type of psychotic murderers. There was a whole bunch of background stuff, and of course Montauk was kind of time travel, but there's a whole bunch of other things linked with that. And of course, Preston, deprogrammed a lot of these people who are having serious problems in their lives, and we don't know who is what or where, who's a Montauk boy or not. We just don't know. But his way of deconditioning them and asking them questions and so forth was to, he would masturbate them while asking them questions and having sensors around him of different types of machines. She mentions radionic machines. I'm not sure if that's true, but there were some sort of machines that he was trying to assist these people, and this is apparently something that works. So it didn't seem to be directly involved in something. There was more of a questioning going on here during this deconditioning masturbation process. And of course, he is gay. And she claims that he was not interested in working with her because she wasn't a male. So I don't know how true all that is. But the bottom line is that I heard Preston talk about this on an interview, and it was the fact that he said that this is how they were conditioned, which is true. I've just mentioned that. This is a very common way to condition people, because you break their connection to the, quote, common good world, and then what's after that? What's after that? So he talked about that because he said that's how they were programmed initially, and that's how you have to remove their programming. So here again, we have a lot of very uncredible people. How much of his story is true? How much of it is some sort of ruse? Now, they tried to spin this story that Preston was doing this just as some sort of kinky sexual come-on. Well, this guy has too many other things going on. His place is loaded with electronics. He talks about so many other stories, and there's very little of it has to really do with any kind of sexuality. Now, and of course, there wasn't that many people who claimed to be part of this programming. So he's going to have quite a few strange and intermittent contact if that's the only way he's getting it. So I don't particularly buy that. I think it's strange. I think it's convenient. But on the other hand, there doesn't seem to be any follow-up here in terms of the fact of any kind of more physical contact that I am aware of. Again, if this is some sort of sex ploy, there certainly isn't much of it going on. There's 15 or 20 of these people showing up at different times in different years, I believe. It's hard to put together that. So this is something that's just contrived by this guy so he can get off on it. His place is filled with old electronics that he works with. He's developed a very particular type of sound system that kind of enters your consciousness. He's a metaphysician that supposedly looks inside of you. And, if you make statements like that, you're going to have to back it up. Now, the reporter asked him about that. He said, well, tell me about myself. And Preston said, well, I have to come close and put my hands around you and everything else. Apparently, the reporter didn't want to go through this. He certainly should. It didn't say that he was going to physically grab him, but he wanted to feel his energy fields. And since he didn't do that and couldn't prove whether Preston was a liar or not, well, it kind of killed the whole story. So the whole idea is he didn't like the filth and the stink and the fact that this guy is morbidly obese and a lot of outrageous statements he made, and obviously filthy cans of food all over the place. So this is a really big turnoff, needless to say. But it doesn't prove anything. Only weirdos are stories like this. You're not going to go over to some sort of executive at Lockheed who's going to tell you about all the secret projects they're in. You're going to find a guy like this, and this is the rub. On the other hand, he has absolutely no credibility. His stories mean nothing. His books mean nothing. There's no way to prove any of it. There's a few people he works with, Cameron Duncan, whatever his name is, this psychic apparently he has contact with, and was supposed to be the head psychic there, and they're doing their things. But as I said, he told my friend a whole bunch of nonsense about himself, that he was, I don't know, King Solomon or whatever it was that he was supposed to be. Well, this is just ridiculous. So the whole idea is there's a lot of fantasy going on here as well, and he's stroking a lot of people physically and spiritually, feeding them information that they want to hear. So this is an important aspect as well to understand of what's going on here. So do check that out so you kind of get an opinion here. And this is the same old story that we get with everything. What is the credibility to this story? What's the credibility of what was going on there? What are all that happens? Preston Nichols certainly appears, and I don't know if anybody's ever checked out his educational background, that he does have electronics in his background or not. I think it's true, but he certainly is a guy who's into electronics. But, he's also very dated electronics because everything he's using is from the 40s and the 50s. It's all tube-based. And of course, for what he's doing, particularly music-based, is exactly what he should be doing. But he doesn't seem to ever got past that. He didn't learn advanced electronics and go into solid-state and integrated circuits like has been done in the near future. So he's very backwards there. And what are we supposed to? He's got good stories like so many of these people do. And I've heard them all. And some people speak better than others, and they all tend to be weirdos. Strange, effeminate, goofy looking, talking nonsense. And while they have some good information, that's followed up by some of the most outrageous nonsense you'll ever want to get involved with. And generally, these kind of books that are published and so forth are just passed on to people. And you're not going to get too many credible people that publish a book like this. They're going to publish a story that is exciting and fun, and they're not looking for the facts. Conveniently, so many writers and so forth believe whatever they're told. Well, it's convenient for them. They're not going to research whether this person is goofy or having problems or where they come from. They don't care. They're going to put together a story that's going to sell books. And apparently the Montauk Project has sold hundreds of thousands of books. Now, it is something that has sold a lot, so it is claimed. I don't know if those figures are real either. It's hard to know. I don't believe anything. I want to see facts and figures. Certainly, there were very popular books in the 90s, but what does that mean? Does that mean hundreds of thousands? I don't know. A lot of books don't sell that much. Some new agey type books can sell 100, 200, 300,000. You just don't know. Shirley MacLaine sold millions. So this is all part of understanding the bigger picture of what's going on. And a lot of stuff you have to overlook this. Now, this seems outrageous that this gay guy is masturbating other people. But, this doesn't seem to be something that goes any further than that. There is no oral sex involved. There doesn't seem to be any physical contact. So this is pretty low-level crappy sex. And I guess you could get off on it if you think that's some sort of thing. But, you got to understand that if this is some ploy by him. When you are gay, and it's probably going to sound terrible, but the point is that it's very easy to hook up when you're gay, when you're male or a female. I lived in Palm Springs, an entirely gay area. There were clubs there that people went into and everything else, and I met a lot of them. And, they're more than happy to have sex with you almost instantly. It's not really a problem, and they're always hustling somebody. So he, of course, living in New York City area, he certainly could go out and find willing groups of people out there, I'm assuming, that he could get sexually involved with. So did he have to do this? Well, is it part of deprogramming? Yes, it is. Is there better ways? Well, I think there are other ways. But, sexuality is a very potent tool. And if you use that in a conditioning process, which is done by people to negatively condition you, it can be a very effective tool. But people want to shun it because it's of their own personal prudish stupidity, problematic sexuality that this whole society has. So I'm not sure that that's the only way, and as I've mentioned, I've seen it thousands of times. If you're gay, you can get sex within seconds going into a club, and it doesn't really matter what you look at, obviously his size, but if that's what he gets off on, it's hard to believe that is much to begin with. Secondly, there are certainly other ways of doing it. Now, certainly it's a valid way as well. And sex is very potent. It puts you off guard. It is an effective way of doing things. Of course, it's very strange. But the bottom line is that it's difficult. But he didn't seem, from what I was told when he was going through this masturbation process, this wasn't, hey, aren't you a good-looking baby? Ooh, look at this. It was the fact that he was actually hitting them with very strong questions and interrogation with different machines on to see if these people were responding correctly. So this wasn't your traditional little trick here. And Preston Nichols didn't need to do this. And thinking that this is some sort of sexual con, he also had a lot of money from the sale of his books, so we are led to believe. So he could have bought what he wants as well. So none of this adds up to that this is just some kinky thing by him. The problem is when you're that heavy, that weird, in a filthy little shack like he has. And of course, the producer claimed this, but we didn't see any pictures of it. He does show us a picture of his converted school bus, which didn't look very filthy to me. The machines looked wiped off and cleaned and everything else, so I don't know what was filthy or not. And of course, he was supposed to stink and everything else. Well, big people tend to have that because it's very difficult to clean yourself when you're so obese. So could that be a problem? And the fact with the food all around, well, it certainly could be what somebody lived off. It's hard to believe he lived to be his middle 60s if he lived off of that horrible Spam, which is some sort of God knows what. So all of that we have to take into consideration to understand. So I think you jump to these conclusions, but here again, we got to understand that people, and particularly people connected with Preston Nichols and this particular area, and the author of his books, his associate author as well, have no credibility, and they're not checking anybody out, and they're not checking into things. There's no validation. Someone who says that I went to electrical engineering college in the Southwest, they write it down as fact. They don't check it. They never do. And there's a whole sorts of problems. And the people that write about this are not very wrapped too well either. So we have this long history of very strange things that happen here. So this is really a fun, fantastic video. I think that gives you another insight into it. So you should definitely take the 10 minutes, look at this, see what Stuart Swerdlow, which is another part of the Montauk Project, or supposedly is. And again, everybody's kind of weird, but if you are someone who's not weird, you're not going to come out and talk about, I work for IBM, I'm a manager for IBM. Yeah, my days in the Montauk Project. Click. He's going to be on the street faster than he can say his own name. He'll be ripped. The men's room keys will be ripped out of his hand. His desk will be thrown out in the street with him on it. So you got to understand that. So you're not going to get away with that. So very few people of any kind of worth and merit that are connected to anything ever come out and talk about it. Now, it's very interesting with this reporter. She's out there with so many other things, and we'll have to look through her YouTube videos as well, and I'll probably put some links there as well so you can hear her side of the story. But I think she's getting a little bit, I don't know if she was offended because he didn't want to masturbate her, or she just finds this strange. So I don't know what's so strange about it in terms of that, but apparently she may have some personal sexual hang-ups. So the whole idea is why this stuff is made into such ridiculousness, like all sex is. Everybody's got these horrible sexual hang-ups, and everything's a big problem because we have generated it into such a taboo of anything sexual is horrible. As it even come up today where you can't even make a comment, you can't touch somebody on a shoulder, anything that goes on. So any little comment, any little, even in passing, touching, which may be in a friendly way, is considered a horrible offense. And people's careers are ruined all the time, just like the governor of New York and everything else, because they made some different comments. They talked to people freely because that's what you're supposed to do. You know, if like the governor of New York just went through a divorce and he was talking to one of his assistants saying, you know any babes? You know? So that's what you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to help people because you know other girls. But of course, we all know that other girls are just kind of, you know, maybe it's like this girl. You know, she seems to have hang-ups. So the whole idea, don't they all? So you've got all sorts of problems that happen in these areas that we have to look at in a more intelligent, rational, and adult way. So I don't consider this as some bizarre sexual thing, but done in the context of this odd-looking, kind of disgusting guy in a filthy, dirty place, really puts a spin on it that is just disgusting. It just is certainly not something that you would want to get involved with. But, you know, to a certain extent, you have to look past that. We're talking about this guy's books and everything else, and what were they? And it is an interesting story. How much of it is true, like everything else, we don't know. What percentage of the Montauk books have any value whatsoever? Is it 5%? 10%? 50%? 60%? Well, we just don't know. And this is the big problem with everything. And somebody can give you good information one day, like maybe the first book by Preston Nichols was good. But then he says, gee, look at all the money I made. I got to come up with 2 or 3 more books. So we're going to take that story and we're going to expand upon it. We're going to talk about all sorts of other things that I kind of remember, but maybe not have really happened. So this is really what happens with all these things. So we just don't know, and it happens with people. Someone can have good information in one area, and then people go to them and say, okay, yeah, well, that's wonderful. Yeah, and they've talked about this 100 times. Then you have to come up with new stories. And you have to find new people that come forward. Oh, my buddy there is talking to me now, and I give you this. This is what goes on. And, you know, there just isn't any proof of it. Certainly, Preston Nichols didn't even bother to try and produce some sort of time travel thing. He's working strictly with sound, mostly some electronics that he built, some kind of radionic type instruments. But, you know, there's some secret stuff he built, but not much of anything. And it doesn't seem like a lot of his stuff worked that well, as was told to me from my friend, is that he built a lot of stuff that melts and burns up and everything. It doesn't show he was a very good electrical tech. Now, that's what I was told. So we just don't know with the entire situation. It's a fascinating story. But, you know, like everything else in life, you know, it has to be buyer beware. And that means buying into somebody's written information, buying into their documentaries, buying into anything anybody says, anywhere, anytime. Because you're going to be fed a pile of stinking hot poo. Because that's what we had. And we recently find this in every single event that happens. We're fed garbage. Complete garbage to move us in a particular direction so you can be abused and used. And we just saw this highlighted to pretty much the highest degree possible with the Ukrainian war. The plain and simple fact is that is just a scam from day one, and nothing was written. And the whole thing was a scam, by the way, all set up by Russia and everybody else in the world, so this is exactly what happened. The entire thing, from beginning to end, was engineered, set up, and done in a deliberate fashion, particularly by the genius known as Putin. Certainly, none of the West is smart enough to even come close to his genius. What a genius of planning, and I'll talk about that in some other lecture here soon. But the whole idea is that we have to look at these things rationally. But this is a great little insight. And do follow up. If you're really interested in this, I'm going to try and list several videos by this Chica woman. and see exactly what else her opinions are about all this stuff, and see exactly what we can get. Because you got to look at the strange and different stuff. There's the average stuff done out there by Preston and his buddies, and then there's stuff done by kind of alternative reporters like this. And she was actually interviewed. She also goes by the name of Alexandria. So I don't know what Chica means. That's her handle. That's the way she rolls. So the whole idea is that it's very, very interesting. We have to look at everything. So if we look at the stuff put out by certain people who want us to believe in a certain way, then we're going to be misled. So you always got to look at the good and the bad, and then using your own hopefully educated opinion, you come to a synergistic understanding. Well, this was good here, and this was good over there. This makes no sense. I know this is a lie. And I've caught people in so many lies it isn't even funny. And all of these cartoon type stories have a real problem to them, and so does the authors that put these things out. They have no credibility whatsoever. None of the people they deal with have credibility. Does this woman have credibility? I don't know. I haven't looked into her enough. But again, she has certain problems, and she doesn't like the fact of that here's a way. Well, she doesn't know about deprogramming. She also doesn't know about programming. She doesn't understand the power of sex. But of course, why would she? I mean, I'm sure she's another prudish, problematic woman who doesn't understand sexuality in general. Of course, this is the entire world. So instead of people embracing sexuality because it's such a force in your life, people shun it and then get all screwed up. So this is a very interesting article. Check it out. Watch that particular. There isn't a link to that. You have to go to this page and follow and click on the actual player there, and you'll get that 9-10 minute actual video. So hopefully this has cleared up things yet again. Always be wise, always be careful, and trust no one. Question all authority, believe nothing, and seek the highest road of gnosis to give you the ultimate answer. Until next time.